What's up, humans, and welcome to another Psicoactivo for today. Okay, so I got a few updates on a few things. First of all, you guys know that I've been talking to director Ida Cuellar from Catalunya. He's the one who made the Jacobo Grinberg documentary, The Secret of Dr. Grinberg. We've been talking, we've been exchanging ideas. We have an unreal connection when it comes to creativity. So he got excited, as I am, for just talking to him because he's an amazing director and a brilliant mind. But he recently let me know that we are going to be working on a project together, a new documentary. All I can tell you now is that it has to do with the phenomenon. But we're trying to pin down the proper story to tackle, because we want to tell a story that is different from all the other types of documentaries out there. I'm already compiling a list of the ones I think are the most important, but if you got any suggestions, leave them in the comments and I'll check them out. I already have like a long list, but still, let me know. That's one. And he has a brilliant YouTube channel by his own name, Ida Cuellar. I'm going to leave it in the description too, where he's posting some of the never before seen material from that documentary. And the recent post he did was from one of the experiment that potentially made Dr. Jacobo Grinberg disappear in 1994. This experiment stems from a paper that Albert Einstein helped write back in the day when he referred to quantum entanglement as spooky action at a distance. The reason he called it spooky is because he didn't really understand what was going on. He theorized, and along his peers, they theorized that particles are actually interconnected all throughout the universe, and that there should be a way to prove that they are connected, even if they're thousands of light years away. When one has a reaction, the other one has a reaction at the same time, so they're instantly connecting. So over the years and after Dr. Jacobo Grinberg's disappearance, there has been a lot of advancement in that. In a recent live stream with Patrick from Vetted, Professor Simon Holland spoke to us about quantum tunneling communication, which, I mean, yeah, it has been proven by this German scientist, but it is not yet at a point where people and humans can use it or utilize it on their day-to-day. It's just like has been proven inside a lab, which is still years away from actually having an application for it. But nonetheless, it has been proven. Back in 2022, quantum entanglement was officially proven as well. There were 3 scientists who received a Nobel Physics Prize, where I still believe Dr. Jacobo Grinberg should have been included posthumously. Why do I say this? Because back in 1993 and 1994, he was conducting an experiment he named the transferred potential. This was an attempt to prove that this spooky action at a distance was actually possible, but not between particles, between human minds. And the people who worked with him, who are very much still alive and still among us, spoke to Ida Cuellar about this, and Ida released 20-something or maybe half an hour small video where 4 people talk about it. I asked him permission to use the statements of 2 people for this video, and I want to let you guys know what they say about this transferred potential experience so you can understand what Dr. Grinberg was trying to prove. The people who spoke, who were collaborators and are also scientists, worked closely with Dr. Grinberg in different experiments, but they attempt to explain the quantum entanglement between human minds the transferred potential. So their names are Miss Attie and Mr. Sperry Andrews. The experiment consists on putting two people inside Faraday cages that are magnetically protected so nothing comes out. No kind of waves of any kind can come out. So that will ensure that if some type of wave from the technology that is placed on their brains could come out, it doesn't. That ensures that whatever connection that two people feel, because they put two people inside a Faraday cage first, they make them interact and meditate and acknowledge each other and look at each other in order to create a connection. And then they take one of the people out of the cage and enact flashes on one of the people that stayed on the cage and connect the other one to electroencephalogram machine. And they see how when one gets flashed in the face, in the eyes, the other one also gets a reaction with the needles. It is slightly smaller, the reaction from the person who is not being flashed in the eyes, but there is proof right there that a connection is made by these. It's basically through emotions and the over encompassing aspect of what telepathy really is. Because if you think about it, when you are flirting with someone you like, that is also a form of telepathy. When you are communicating with your pet, that is also a form of telepathy. And it is not like magic, like you read each other's thoughts. I'm sure that is also a level of telepathy, but telepathy also has to do with how your extrasensory perception in general feels. It's not just your mind, it's your entire body and your nervous system. And that is what happens. And Grinberg wanted to prove that scientifically, and I believe that he did with these Faraday cages, but he wanted to go further. He wanted to prove that quantum entanglement was real between human minds by separating these two people, country from country, thousands of kilometers or miles away. So that's what happened. Make telepathy not only real, but go mainstream, because he was trying to peer review the paper that he was writing. I'm going to leave in the description a copy of the paper he wrote that is incomplete right now, where he talks about this. But we, as humans, are connected through the emotions. So emotions, in a sense, between us, are part of this telepathy that exists. Mr. Andrews goes on to talk about the different scientists in New York who worked with Jacobo and how he was demonized and stigmatized for a while. They already thought, the general scientific community, that he was crazy, that he was doing something that would lead him to a dead end. But the problem is that when they were thinking about this as he was conducting his experiment, when he traveled to India, he didn't even get into the plane and he disappeared. And this is where my entire investigation leads to, because I found evidence of Dr. Grinberg going to conferences throughout the world where people like Jacques Vallée, John Keel, Andrea Pujarich, and other prominent ufologists and different kinds of researchers of all of the French topics in the world used to get together and talk about these things. That's like a rabbit hole that I think is one of the most fascinating to go in, but I found a few doors being slammed in my face. And I think that this experiment he conducted is the key to finding out why he disappeared and why people who I ask about this that I know something play coy and go I don't know, I've never heard of him. That is kind of strange. but I am going to keep investigating. This is Miss Attie talking about Dr. Grinberg and part of the experiment.
Asked them to do nonverbal communication, as Jacobo called it, direct communication. In other words, direct communication gave the instruction to feel each other and to try to make a unit. We would turn on a light, which was the signal for one of them to switch to another area that was also electromagnetically isolated and relaxed. There, all they had to do was close their eyes. We would give one of the two people 100 flashes of light. We did it with auditory, but the strongest was light. When you stimulate a person with light, it causes what is called a triggered potential, which I can show you here. For example, this is a triggered potential. It is the normal signal comes at time 0, the flash was given, and this does not happen when there is control. In other words, there is a control. Nothing happens, the brain does not respond.
What is a control?
The stimulus was given, but the light did not come out. In other words, the computer registered the moment at which the segment had to be recorded, but the subject did not receive the flash, so there was no exact reaction. On the other side, the person who was isolated at rest and did not know anything about what was happening to his partner, we also recorded his segments. Once this was finished, we put them together and compared the records. The inference from this is that the brain also functions as the same system. That the moment you and I make a direct communication, where we make a unit and separate, we are still a unit. In other words, what affects me will affect you. The next big question is, why don't we realize it? Because the unstimulated subject never said you gave him a flash of light. In other words, it does not decode what happens to the partner. The interpretation we give it is that we would go crazy if that happened. This is the scientific verification of telepathy. These are the first steps of telepathy. It could not be called telepathy because the other person did not talk about what was happening to the other person, but his brain did react. This project was like the culmination. The next step was to test distance, its transfer potential, because it is believed that the potential was transferred. But then we said, no, it doesn't transfer. It happens at the same time. This is not local. There is not a transfer, but it is the same system. The only way to check it was to do it remotely with India. We already had the permit, the doctor, the equipment, everything. And Jacobo disappeared. So that project was cancelled. They were rigorous. It was the scientific method. But there was one variable that was not controllable, and it is real. When you work with emotions, when you work with direct communication, it is not measurable. I mean, I can't measure how connected you and I are. We are connected 8, and the other couple is connected 7. That is not measurable. That is very, very qualitative. Then people could not tell them. But that, for example, took a lot of validity away from us.
I'm gonna do another one, leave you with Mr. Andrews and his experience of this experiment and other experiments that Grinberg conducted, and the importance of Jacobo's discovery, how it's one of the most important, if not the most important, scientific investigation of all time that has to do with human potential. This is Mr. Sperry Andrews talking about his experience with Dr. Grinberg and his experiments as well.
And so Jacobo was particularly interested in showing that in the half second after the stimulus, the light flash, that you could see a response in this separate subject that was emotionally or psychically or consciously connected with the person being stimulated. That you could see a response in the first 65 milliseconds in this other person, which was pre-conscious, which would mean that their nervous systems were entrained or inseparable, even though they were seemingly separate, in separate laboratories, under electrically shielded conditions. So that could show that our nervous systems, in some sense, were responding to the same stimulus, that I was empathically sensitive to what was happening to you at a distance. So even though we appeared to be separate at some level, we were not separate. And Jaco and I were both very interested to see if that could be demonstrated scientifically, because the so-called conscious mind is only 3 to 5% of our nervous system. The other 95 to 97% of our nervous system is the so-called unconscious mind, which is actually much more conscious than our so-called conscious mind. In fact, the so-called unconscious mind is processing about, by some estimates, 4,000 billion bits of information per second, whereas our so-called conscious mind is processing about 2,000 bits of information per second. That's a huge difference. And so Jaco was being very, very pioneering and very courageous to attempt to study this with electroencephalography. And yet the person who invented electroencephalography invented it in order to study telepathy. So there was a history with EEG research. We had this innate natural resource that we could tune into socially and interpersonally and individually and wake up together to our greater unity and access a higher intelligence, a common sense, a commonly sensed intelligence as a species. The question that we were asking, is it possible to demonstrate that we are indivisible in space and time, or are we actually all separate creatures sending each other messages and being telepathic in that way? So what is the nature of telepathy? Are we indivisible? Or are we separate and communicating in time independent upon space? Between these people's nervous systems, because he wanted to show that there was something that was non-local, something approaching that was instantaneous, that was not separated by space or time between people. And the importance of that, for the sake of demonstrating spiritual unity, was that if he could show, or we could show, in experiments with multiple laboratories located thousands of miles apart in widely separated geographic locations, if we could show the world, you see that we're not separate. Using science to hold a mirror up to what's really going on with us. We could essentially bring people to these experiments that were open to this oneness, this indivisibility of spirit embodied, and to see if we could demonstrate this scientifically in a rigorous way to the whole left brain, patriarchal, scientific, military, industrial, political, medical community. And so that we, as scientists, needed to bring evidence to them that we're all connected so they would believe that. And then they'd stop being so divisive and controlling and fear-based about managing society with force and fear and wars and so forth. And for Jaco to disappear, it was like losing my own, part of my own being. And he was the lead scientist. He was the person who was to be the principal neuroscientist, educating the other scientists in how to perform the transferred potential of these multiple laboratories in different countries. He was the one who had studied with Leroy John 25 years before, who was the leading, if not the leading, neuroscientist in the world. The most prestigious neuroscientist, the director of the New York Brain Research Laboratories, which I was helping to and talking with Leroy, Joy myself, to try to get Jaco's work replicated by Leroy John, who was like skeptical when Jaco disappeared. It was like all the work that I had done and all my hopes and dreams to bring about this focus. Using science as believing stepping stone for humanity, just like evaporated, and the rug was pulled out from underneath it. But in the last 20 years, the transition has been that we have to allow for subjective experience to be objectively studied, because otherwise we're not able to study consciousness. And so that's part of what spirituality has been demonstrating for thousands of years, that as many have said, that the observer is the observed. What we're observing is the result of our observation. So we are actually observing ourselves. We're not observing something separate from ourselves. And David Bohm, who was one of the most famous physicists in the world, working with Yodero Krishnamurti for 20 years, he was saying in quantum physics, he wrote the textbook on quantum physics that was used in all the universities. He said that you cannot separate any two parts of the universe. The quantum mechanics says that the observer is uniting all parts. So there's no way to separate the parts, which is what previous physics and science had been doing. And so Jaco was all part of that. And using the instruments of the day to try to demonstrate that there was no division in space and time, he inspired the respect and interest and collaboration of his students. And even though in his university, as I understood, a lot of the other teachers or professors didn't think much of what he was doing, and other scientists, neuroscientists, and so forth thought he was just crazy, and his own mentor, Eroy John, thought what he was doing was cuckoo, Jaco, nonetheless, he was doing what we know today was some of the most important work that could have been done for the sake of humanity. So how special do you need to be, you know? Well, you need to be Jacobo Grinberg to know that, I guess.
Yeah. So, this is pretty wild, right? I'm going to drop another different clip on Twitter that explains, Jacobo explains how this experiment was conducted. But for now, I'm just going to leave you guys with this so you can ponder and realize how important Jacobo is to the consciousness investigation in general. I'm going to keep asking these questions. Why is he being so ignored? And why is he not being given the credit that he deserves for his work? These connections that I made in the past with other prominent ufologists, I think are like one of the main clues to what probably could have happened. And the fact that Ida connects Jacobo with Stargate makes you think, doesn't it? When he disappeared in 1994, Stargate ended like 3 months after that. Is that connected in any way? Is this experiment connected in any way? Because I've seen some different other experiments that also have to do with flashing the eyes that Jacobo did here that are used for mind control and weaponization of these abilities. Were Jacobo's discoveries attempted to be weaponized? I wonder. It wouldn't surprise me because everything is weaponized by the military. If it has an application, you can be damn sure that it will be weaponized because we're living in this war-prone society and divided world that only thinks about conquering the other. I don't think Jacobo would have been cool with his experiments being used in such manner. I highly doubt it. And the fact that he disappeared just like that, out of thin air, makes you wonder. So that's why I'm going to keep asking questions, especially to these people. Dr. Jacques Vallée, I need to talk to you. Dr. Hal Puthoff, we need to talk. Dr. Russell Tark, we need to talk. I hope you guys find it that I am not after you in any way. I just need to know if you know something or whatever you can tell me about Grinberg. If I were to have like a hypothesis of what happened to him, I wouldn't say that these people I mentioned had anything to do with it because I don't sense they are bad people. But I do sense that since they were, in a way, working for governments, there are some arms of these governments that may have had the last say on what happened to the doctor or his fate, and they had no control over it. So even if they knew him, which I think they did, I know that Vallée did, there's proof of that. I think that whatever happened to him, maybe they fought for him. That's what I like to think, because they know what happened. I'm pretty sure they do. I'm just not sure they want to even talk about it because they fear for their own lives. But yeah, that's as far as I go. I'm not gonna name like anybody else that I think is potentially linked to this. I've already given some names in the past, both from the Mexican and U.S. government, but that's as far as I'm going because I also love being alive and spending time with my family. So what I do want to fight for, and I think these scientists will agree, is that Dr. Grinberg deserves the credit for this work. And that is something that I am willing to fight for, that I will keep fighting for. People should know everywhere in the world who this man is and what he did for humanity. I'm going to make sure. So yeah. Thank you for everything. Thank you for tuning in. It's been an eventful day. I have another video on the UAPDA dying again. Go check that out. I'm going to leave Ida's video on the description so you guys can check it out. It only has 1.9 thousand views right now. I think it needs far more than that. His other videos have done tremendously, so please go watch it. It's in Spanish, but it's really fascinating. So you guys are going to get a much better grip of what's happening. So if you like the content you see, please consider subscribing, like the video, comment on the video, and share it on any platform you imagine. YouTube loves that. So that's been helping me out a lot. If you do that only, that will be more than enough. But if you find it within yourself to support the channel in any other way, I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can check out the different ways in which you can support. I'm going to leave a subscriptions link in there too, because the channel now has as a members channel. So I'm going to keep doing about weekly videos there or so. But yeah, let me know what you think about this. What you think about the transfer potential experiment. Read it if you can, so you can tell me if these people are right about Jacobo. Did he discover officially and scientifically telepathy? That's a great question. All right, that's all I got. I'll see you guys until tomorrow's video. Bye-bye.